Anyways, still making snow cones. If you ever get into arguments with people, because people don't always get along, and they tell you that they would like to see you die a violent death out of anger, or tell you that they're going to do whatever it takes to make you homeless, destitute, and living out in the streets in the cold and freezing weather just because they're mad, because they don't, you have to tell them things that they don't really want to hear, or do things that they don't really want done when it's for their own physical well-being and benefit. Just remember, for one, it's never good or cool or feeling great to be homeless at any point. It's not fun or awesome or cool to be sleeping in a vehicle in 20-degree weather. Technically, where I'm at, the temperature is 17 degrees. Every 20 minutes, the entire window refreezes over. So, unless you are going to put yourself in the situation of the person that you would wish them to be in out of anger, spite, because of whatever problems, personal issues, drug addictions, whatever it might be, or even coming off of a new medication, being put on another one, and then denying any side effects of either or medications or combinations of medications until one subsides, until the other one takes over. Because a lot of times people in the psychiatric world, they don't bother to wean somebody off of a medication, or even the opioid world. They don't bother weaning someone off of a medication long enough so that there's no complication between two medications in a system, while one medication was cut off and a new one is being added to the person. Or, in my case, the person decided that they were going to come off of Suboxone and not have the proper medical attention for the hostility, the anger, all those pent-up emotions that come with dropping off of a medication or dropping themselves off of a medication. Unfortunately, with opioids, the problems, especially with Suboxone, is almost the exact same with everybody across the gambit. I'm actually on a website that kind of makes fun of the situation, but shows the situation of what opioids does and will do to a person in the long term, even coming off of the opioids. And all the excuses and stories that they use to deny what the opiates do to them and others, all the way down to common side effects that actually happen, that people will say is another medical condition to keep the deniable plausibility going of the medications that they are on, taking or not taking properly. Or in some cases, they're dropped off of medications, like, for example, Vyvanse, which is a form of amphetamine salts, and then keeping the bottles around and then using them for basic needs. For example, if they want to go out and do something that afternoon, they'll go take a single pill of Vyvanse that they were taken off of months before and have their pills hidden, and then get that speed going for that day of what they need to do or want to do, just getting out of the house, in turn wrongly using prescriptions that they were dropped off of. And the people who try to help them, the people who have to tell them you can't do this, while everybody else, friends and family, stick their head in the sand and say it's okay or completely ignore it. Or in one case, the best friend gave the other person an entire bottle of liquid Percocets from their daughter's dental surgery. Tried to say that it was for me. I can't do opioids. I have a metabolism issue where my body doesn't metabolize opioids the way it should. So the doctors stated it's only for surgeries. It would be like taking an opioid for the first time ever after a surgery, and it be that exact same effect every single time. So the dosage, which may be good for the average person, would be too high for a person like me, and could actually cause me to overdose on something that is basic for other people after surgery, but too much for my own system and my own body. I have explained this to that person countless times when they were sober, and actually gave me the alternatives to go to other doctors, do procedural stuff, which I've always done, instead of being on any type of opioid. Even when, for example, my now dead doctor, Julian Falla, after being dropped off of Tramadol, which is an analgesic and not an opioid. It's above aspirin, but not an opioid. And it doesn't bind to the opioid receptors. Analgesics are a bit different on the body. Even when I had to be dropped off of the Tramadol because of long-term effects on my digestive system, he actually tried putting me on opioids, a minimum of 10 milligrams of Vicodin, even after I explained to him that I didn't want opioids. I don't want to be caught up in the opioid statistic. And with my whole care about other people mentality, in the long term on opioids, I even had to explain to him that I legitimately wouldn't make it. I probably wouldn't survive beyond the 5 years of a long-term opioid. I don't have that predisposition mentally. I mean, I'm sitting here in the freezing weather with my fingers freezing because I gotta go climb under the blankets in a few. But when it comes to certain types of drugs and opioids and things like that, I know my limits. I know what I wouldn't survive on at any point in time. And I've survived through a lot of garbage. Basic stuff, relationship crap, stuff that the average person within a couple of days would be running to the bathroom in anxiety, vomiting. That didn't faze me much. While relationship, worst case scenario, girls using everything against you, type of stuff is like the only few things that really kind of put me in a lull, because they're good at bringing up the worst possibilities and digging up past conversations and twisting them when they're mad, they're angry, they can't remember anything. They're one big ball of emotional goo because of losing a lot of their identity to long-term opioid use. And knowing how to get a person who's walking away from the situation, even if it's just walking out of a room, to get them hooked back into that conversation so they can hurt them even more, because they feel that because the person told them what they don't want to hear, that they're hurting them even more, that they're ruining their lives because they're telling them everything that their friends and family who just want to ignore them and avoid any type of confrontation or situation with them, they'll go in and just go for the worst possible thing to say to people to make them hurt and feel the way they feel only at that exact moment. I mean, a lot of times 10 minutes later they're feeling fine. they're feeling better, but they want to make a person hurt as much as they feel, like physically hurt as much as they feel for that exact moment because somebody had to tell them no, had to say you need to be off these drugs. At one point in time, I actually had to blackmail the person who's the reason for me being in the vehicle. I had to blackmail her best friend into getting help for her and calling her up. And I did give her a way out. I said, hey, I know you're working and everything and you don't have time for stuff like this, but I'm really going to need your help. And then she went on and on about how she can't really help the person. She couldn't, she couldn't help her at any point in time. I gave her just the basic way, a little bit of a time or a bit of the conversation to get out of helping a friend who was supposed to be her best friend since high school. And then I had to remind her that she sold or gave the person an entire bottle of liquid Percocet 2 years before, which actually was the reason why, or the catalyst for the reason why the person got arrested with criminal charges. And if she didn't give her that bottle of liquid Percocet, there would have never been a problem. Now, drugs has a way of making people's view very distorted. And the people who don't really do drugs, except for smoke pot when I had my medical card, and be put in these types of situations, all because, you love somebody. And when all the problems with the opioids and the cops having to come over to the house with every new medication change from methadone, Suboxone, Vyvanse, which is amphetamine salts, Vicodin, you name it, Xanax. The person tried to cope with stuff like that. And always around the same time of year where the person's mother died in May, literally before Mother's Day, and these shit doctors, nurse practitioners who aren't real doctors, they're under a doctor, would give this person the most volatile combinations you can think of with opioids and other types of medications. For example, Prozac, which is also a form of speed, or in that speed amphetamine salt area. Even the manufacturer stated that these are very volatile combinations, especially with Suboxone still being new, and 400 miles away, 3 years, literally a few years ago where they were allowing Suboxone clinics, they are literally just going through these long-term hells that I've been talking to a person about in the past about what I was going through. And they're still, it is a little bit better from what they're saying than methadone, but then all the new statistics state that it's the same, and the addiction at times is even worse than the methadone that they were put on for some other long-term opioid, such as Vicodin, Percocet, whatever they were using for long-term pain that the doctors already knew was going to be a long-term problem. They tried to tell people that they didn't know about the opioids, especially with the opioid epidemic. And even in the state that I lived in, they were cracking down on the doctors just giving these medications out willy-nilly. But there's been a long-term problem with opioids. Yale, Harvard, their medical schools have entire sections of libraries when it comes to opioid addiction and long-term addiction. Now, regardless if they use a newer, synthetic, cleaned-up version of it, the addiction is still going to be the same. It's just going to be cleaner on the body, where the person can be on those medications a little bit longer before it starts physically and mentally degrading their entire psyche and neurological system, their physical well-being, and breaking down liver, kidney, whatever other body parts that it's going to affect negatively. They've known this for a really, really long time, and they hiding behind the deniable accountability of, we didn't know, we don't know. It's still a process learning about long-term pain management. Now, the person I was in a relationship with, she wasn't on opioids. She was on Klonopin, which she was on for way too long, which was given to her because of her mother's death. And that was in 2006. We didn't start officially going out until November 10th of 2011. We hung out, we talked a little bit before Christmas, and we actually decided to date on the 10th of January. I think I may have just said October. But we decided to actually officially date on the 10th of January 2011. And literally we were going to wait until after Christmas to start really hanging out because of her relatives. So she was only taking like Klonopin at the most, and Tramadol, which she wasn't even taking. The person was, she probably had 3 bottles worth in one bottle, because a lot of people, they'll go on that automatic script thing, and they just pick up the scripts at the pharmacy and keep the bottles laying around. Some people do that. Most people don't. I don't. I'm not one of those people. I will pick up my script of a medication when I legitimately run out of the other medication. If I forget to take my meds for a little bit, for example, Tramadol, which is a painkiller, which I was on, if I was feeling good for a while and I wasn't taking the Tramadol, or I was keeping it at a low dose, I may have an extra week worth, and I'd wait until that extra week was over until I picked up a new script of an analgesic non-opioid pain reliever. And some people, they'll just, if it's a take when needed, like Klonopin, a lot of people just take that monthly refill, even though they don't need the refill. They may have 3 months worth of medication, but may only possibly use 1 month's worth of opioids or Klonopin, mood levelers, whatever you want to put in the place of it. And then have an overstock of medications. I mean, it was at a point where I went to the linen closet. In the back of the linen closet, there was an entire shoebox full of different types of medications that weren't even being used. And it was like they were being collected for emergencies when they weren't prescribed anymore. Or if they were under script, it would show that they had a need for that medication every single month, even if they didn't. Now, a lot of people I know do this for insurance reasons. If, for example, if they have an injury and they don't need the medication as often, as long as they keep picking up their script every month, the bottles every month, on record, it would show via insurance that they were, and if they were in a lawsuit, that they would have that necessity for that medication every single month, in turn up the amount of money that they would receive from whatever lawsuit that they were in. I was explained this by an attorney quite a while ago when it came to certain types of ways that people try to up the money in insurance suits or lawsuits and get that extra $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 because of the amount of pain and suffering they were in and what types of meds they had to be on while they were going through whatever they were going through. Now, unfortunately, what I'm going through is not really feeling my hands and making snow cones all night. Now, as you can see, the line isn't out the door for snow cones. And it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and the temperature is under 20 degrees in my vehicle, which kind of sucks. So anyways, I'm just going over and discussing what it's like and the reasonings and the reasons for making snow cones at night at 4 o'clock in the morning when I don't have a clientele for snow cones in 18-degree weather. And, you know, sometimes you do have to go over these details from time to time and explain a little bit of history when it comes to somebody's own pandemic living situation, especially with COVID and emergency services not ever having shelter places or anything else like that during something like COVID and this type of pandemic. And the only time there was ever a bed available was out of the county in another county for under 24 hours. And with no gas and ability to get to that certain location, it becomes a problem. And then when you call the administration of those locations, you find out that those locations weren't ever even open yet. The doors weren't even open yet. But they promise something that isn't tangible when they know it's not tangible. And then you find out that that tangibility didn't even exist because the doors of those shelters haven't even legitimately opened yet for anybody. And being told that these people can't make these promises that they've been making me since September 20th or September 17th. Even when a little bit after, when the temperature got down to about 27 degrees, I got a viral infection in my lungs, and somehow I blew out both my ankles, and one of my legs swelled up to twice its size in the process. Even though I did have to go to the ER and urgent cares for them to look at all this stuff and have me immediately sent to Yale at the time to go get COVID testing to possibly find out if it was COVID or not, which I actually passed. But everything else was just a friggin' nightmare. I got inhaler thingy that they gave me for breathing better, because apparently the issue was viral and pleurisy, meaning swelling of the lining of the lungs or separation of the lining of the lungs. And that was a whole nother nightmare of just breathing on warm days. So in general, you girls and you guys, when you're mad at your significant other or partner or bestie, try not to wish so much on them for them to die tragically that you would love to see them freezing, homeless, cold, alone, and die in the streets just because of you're mad and just want to hurt them at that specific moment. Because when dreams like these do come true for some people, you know, it's not fun for anybody. And do you know how little profit you can make making snow cones in 18-degree weather at the end of November or even during the winter? It's why a lot of these ice cream shops and cold food places are seasonal and they shut down in the winter. I mean, people aren't knocking at my door for snow cones, and I was told that they were literally the best snow cones in the state. So, anyways, try not to wish so much pain, hurt, and anguish on other people when you're mad. It will because if you're not in my situation or those situations, and that person ends up in those situations, I mean, you might think it's funny at the moment. You might laugh it off, say, ha ha, they get what they deserve. I mean, when you spend your time cleaning up for somebody, trying to get them to eat healthy food, washing all their clothes for them, vacuuming, getting their sheets changed, when their beds literally smell like rotten milk and yeast from horrible foods and body sweat, and not cleaning themselves, and trying to get cat hair, change the sheets because they're highly allergic to cats, but have the cats in the bed, and the bed is literally a full layer of cat hair, and they're complaining about horrible allergies and being sick, which are severe symptoms of allergies to pets also on top of that. And then you get the pets out of the room, and then they start feeling better. You get them to eat wholesome food, they start to feel better. But then the moment they're told something they don't want to hear from anybody, from relatives, to what a person has to tell them to get to their medical appointments, to get them on their feet, and you say the wrong thing that they need to manipulate at that moment. Yeah, it just, for a lot of people, sometimes those moments of hate come true even when they've done the best that anybody could do for that person. Even when the person, like myself, was advised how to take care of certain situations via doctors, via Yale medical employees, via Hartford healthcare employees. I went over this stuff with my doctors so often that they'd have to tell me that I'm here to treat you, not to help you treat somebody else who isn't my patient. And I can't give you any more advice on how to get through a situation, how to tell a person something, and or how to personally cope, which is the only thing that they could do, and still say, I'm not going to even explain to you how to cope with something that isn't making you better, that is making you worse, bringing you to my office after already giving you step-by-step instructions on how to handle the situations when it came to somebody on some sort of opioid or long-term opioid medication combination. You know, like speed, amphetamine salts, combinations to balance other opioids out that are still highly addictive and still very dangerous. I mean, the person was going through, just in Benadryl, to take away the side effects of the opioids, the itchy, scratchy side effects when they're trying to take themselves off, or the doctors cut them off of the opioids. They were literally taking probably over 150, and at the most with a 200 pill bottle of Benadryl, which is scary amount, a lot of Benadryl for somebody to be taking in 1 month, and then just trying to convince a person like myself that it's what it says on the bottle that they can take. I mean, you can't literally, aren't supposed to be literally taking 150 to over 200 pills of Benadryl in a month to chase the side effects of an opioid or an opioid derivative when their doctors cut them off of the medication because they're not going to their appointments. I mean, I was selling my paintball gear and putting gas in the vehicle so they can get to their appointments. and they still weren't making it to their appointments. And when you have to tell them stuff like this, a person can get so hostile, violent, and belligerent that guess where I am. But there's a little bit more to the complication with judges and things like that. The person wasn't supposed to be on the property anymore, but the judge allowed them to after restraining order violations. And the Middletown Police, the town court system through the pandemic and prior to the pandemic, they'll cater to one side, and the person was already prompted from past problems with the medications, what to say, how it, how to be the victim, how to act like the victim, how to play the judge to have the person, even if they have all the documentation in the world, who has their own apartment in the property, at the house, second two-family apartment, which they were living in since they moved in. And the full agreement for me to move into that property was to have the second floor to myself because of the volatile nature of the medications that the person was on. And that way I would have some type of a buffer or escape from any hostility that arose from new medication combinations, or having to tell the person just, no, I'm not going to help you with this. You have to get off your butt and do that yourself. And with the friends that the person had, which were fair weather friends, and protecting their own assets in the process, because whose side are you going to be on when you're giving a person full bottles of liquid Percocet and then possibly getting in trouble for giving that person that full bottle of Percocet? Whose side are you going to be on? Are you going to be on the side of the person who is the victim of the person's abuse, who is on the opioids? Or are you going to be on the side of the person who you're giving these opioids to that was the catalyst for the entire beginning of the opioid problem? The person was on, didn't have a problem until a tonsillectomy, where the doctor gave her 3 times as long of when it came to the amount of Percocet they gave the adult for getting the tonsils removed and the pain of that for that time frame after the tonsillectomy. I mean, they were only supposed to be on the medication for no more than, I think, a month at the most. They literally gave the person almost 3 months worth of Percocet and said, well, because of your job and your profession, we trust you can handle it. And then after that, they were giving the person Vicodin. And within a very short period of time, Dr. Mariano was upping the person's medication up to 300 milligrams while I'm sitting in the room, standing there going, the person can't be on any more Vicodin. She is already at the level of pain sensitivity. In turn, her body is already craving the medications. And you are creating an addiction right here and now. Dr. Mariano, and by the way, I just scraped all this off. I'm just showing you my night. After Dr. Mariano was told this via me, when HIPAA was completely signed for me to talk to the doctor at that point in time, Dr. Mariano decided to turn to me and say, guess what? You're not the patient. You do not have a say. You are not a doctor. And I, even after reminding him that prior to this, the person was never on an opioid. They were on an analgesic. They weren't in that much pain to require that much opioid. And the only time they were on an opioid was when they had a tonsillectomy. And then all of a sudden, after the 3 months worth of opioids from a tonsillectomy, the person was trying to get and obtaining Vicodin from the doctors. Also, the person who was maintaining their weight under prior to opioids, had this bright idea on opioids that they were going to get radio frequency ablations, which I've had. And they're going to, until they got the radio frequency ablations, they were going to go off their healthy diet and eat all the junk food that they were never ever able to eat before, because they convinced themselves on opioids that they were going to go to the gym and they were going to exercise when they had after radio frequency ablations, which is burning of the nerves in the lower spine along the left and right side of the lower spine to cut away the nerves surgically so the person doesn't feel as much pain in their lower spine. But the pain in that person wasn't bad until they decided they were going to eat a lot, eat junk food. I mean, literally eat enough junk food for 4 people in a week. I mean, spending $50 to $75 extra a week in junk food, which wasn't ever a part of the person's criteria prior to the opioids. But the opioids have a way of convincing somebody the worst possible scenario is good. I mean, every once in a while they get mad, upset with because of their profession or their father, and eat a full cake in 24 hours. And or make a bunch of little mini cakes and eat those in a 12-hour night. Every once in a while, a sugar food binge. But opioids has a way of telling people that the worst possible case scenario that you can think of that will make them worse, but make them feel better in the moment, but long term will destroy everything that they've tried so hard to do and manage as adult, and being an adult and living in an adult life. And for the people around them, it actually is even as bad or worse for the people around them also. I mean, people can sit there and go, oh, that person has an opioid addiction. You should be very kind to them. You should tell them what they want to hear. But it's not just them. It's the people they affect. It's their jobs. It is their careers that they work so hard for. And then they will turn around and blame everybody as their entire life crumbles around them. And it's really, really horrible for the people who have to be there to try to help them and watch their lives crumble around them and not be able to say that they understand as much as they would like to, just because they have to be the responsible, the stern person who no one else is doing or helping in their lives. And you can go with all these self-help books and say, you just have to be there and hold their hand. But when you're there every single day, you can't just do that. If they don't want to get better, I understand that a person has to want to get better, but you have to be able to get to those situations to want to get better. Sometimes you have to be told that you can't eat 25 servings of really horrible dry kids cereal in an hour because you're so high on your medications and drugs that you just destroyed the entire